The thing that is missed by a lot of people, including flat earthers and actually Christians, is the method by which you prove all things. In law, just like in a court case, things are proven by evidence. In an ideal court case, what is sought for and cannot be denied is absolute irrefutable proof to it. There's absolutely no doubt. That is what is sought for in human courts in terms of law. The reasonable, unreasonable doubt or whatever, that is not something to be praised when it's present. You see the idea of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? Even unreasonable or remote possibilities, that is not something that's praiseworthy to be present in somebody's verdict. They would rather have absolutely nothing. If you were to ask them, they would say, we would prefer that we had all evidence and all questions answered to where it's irrefutable as to what the truth is of the matter. And so in the scientific method, just as in the method in law, where evidence decides the case, and the case is decided by evidence, and it is observable. You see, it must be observable, so you don't take somebody's word for it. Taking somebody's word for it, that's called faith. Just like the ideal standard in law, they don't want to have any faith in any other verdicts. They want to have irrefutable evidence. In science, it's the same way. They want to have nothing but absolute evidence. They don't want to have any faith. And so, I suppose one could say in a hypothesis, which is a guess where there's no evidence yet, you just come up with a concept or an idea, then you look in reality to see if there's evidence for it. A hypothesis has a whole hell of a lot of faith, and a theory contains faith. A scientifically proven thing that's true, no wonder they call it law, like the laws of physics. Those are legally proven true things, observable, repeatable, observable in real life over and over. The standard of proof in science is evidence, and there's no faith in science. You see, when you drop an apple or whatever, it falls to the ground. There's no faith involved in watching it fall to the ground. The principles of the law of buoyancy and density. You can drop a thing of styrofoam and watch it drop to the ground. If you'll notice, it stops at the ground. Why? Because it ain't as dense as the ground. However, you see how you can have a rock laying on top of styrofoam and it won't go down in it, though it is compressing it. But you see, you drop styrofoam on water, it floats. It stops at the water, buoyancy, all that kind of stuff, observable. And they call it the laws of physics, laws that have to do with matter. That's all evidence. There's no faith. And anywhere there's faith, there is the search for evidence to find out what the truth is. And so the question is, why does an apple drop as opposed to it dropping? It is evident that it does drop. The question is, why does it drop? Where you have things sorting themselves out by density, as opposed to this magic gravity, where things are attracted to each other regardless of their composition. Like you can have two bales of hay in space and they'll just move toward each other. That takes a lot of faith, fellas. Gravity. And not only does it take a lot of faith, but actually there's evidence to the contrary, that this magic gravity don't exist. First of all, it's not observable in real life, and they can't repeat it in the laboratory. They can't. So what about those lead balls? They're suggesting that whatever the heck it's made out of, mass attracts mass, and it doesn't matter. Einstein tried to come up with this theory of relativity to tie all things together. Well, I'm coming up with a standard or a process or method by which all things are proven, be it law, science, and Christian doctrines. Christian doctrines must be observable in real life. What God says about people must be observable in real life. And so when you have these people saying that all men deserve death and all men deserve to be punished, we look at the infant. You say, well, he's condemned in Adam, or whatever. You look at the infant in reality. What the heck is he capable of? The answer is nothing. The infant's not able to do anything. He doesn't have any information. He's not able to carry out acts or do whatever. Real life says that infant isn't capable of anything, and the infant hasn't done anything that he could be held responsible for. And so therefore you say there is no way that the infant who lives 2 months and dies deserves to be nailed to a tree and suffer wrath from God. And so therefore Christ could not die in his place. You can look at any infant on this earth who's just born, is 2 months old or 6 months old. You can see it's observable. They are not responsible. So therefore, what they do cannot be held against them. It's observable over and over again that infants are not responsible for the body that God Himself put them in. They're not responsible for that. And that is observable over and over in real life. So what is missed by these people who are flat earthers and who are also Christian, they'll be really sticking by the standard of science. The idea whether there's a curvature of the earth or not, they're looking, observing, see look, there's no curvature. You see, that's observation, it's seen in real life. And they're using that standard of evidence decides the case. And what they're missing is, in law, in the ideal standard of law, is that evidence shall decide the case. And that is the method by which you prove all things, including what the true and actual Christian doctrines are. Because another way to say Christian doctrines is the truth about everyone and everything. And it must be observable. And there is another thing that they miss. They miss what is evidence of goodness in itself, even in concept form, but even in reality, concepts in reality. It is wrong to go rape your neighbor, have a good time, and steal their lawnmower. That is evidence of evil. That's evidence of a violation of law. There is a standard of goodness that is self-evident. The standard or the realization that there are absolutes that do exist, they're undeniable, and that the standard of law is self-evident within itself, that it is the right way to do things and the right way to prove all things. And so just as in science where they're using evidence, they're using a standard. And in law, evidence decides the case, and there is a standard of law, and there is a standard of goodness that is undeniable. Their Christian doctrines are where you have the neglect of this standard and things are in la-la land, to where God has wrath on all men, regardless of what they've done or their state. There's people who are born in this life who will never know their own names in this life. They are born with mental defect, but yet they'll hold the doctrine that all men deserve wrath and all men deserve death and all this kind of stuff. And then what do they have? God punishing an innocent guy, as though that's the standard of law. Do you see how you can't go down the street and punish an innocent guy? You can't do it, or you'll wind up in jail. That's if you're in a halfway reasonable society. But yet they have no problem God doing that, and God violating all kinds of standards of law, like this. Evidence decides the case, you have to exist first. To charge you with a crime, you have to exist, and the crime has to exist. In law, you cannot prosecute a case without evidence. You cannot prosecute a case habeas corpus. That's having the body of the victim. You gotta have the corpse, have the body to even charge somebody. There has to be evidence of a crime. Well, guess what? If the defendant doesn't exist, there's no evidence of a defendant even. With the penal substitute doctrines, the total standard of law and jurisprudence is completely violated. Where you have God adjudicating everybody's case. The idea of the cross, you see, they'll say, well, you see, before the foundations of the world. Fine. Then you have God adjudicating the case or prosecuting the case of everybody before they even exist, before any supposed sins exist and all that kind of stuff. That is not the evidence deciding the case. If you'll notice, it's nothing but faith. You're going to have to take God's word for it. Just as the ball earthers fooled everybody into thinking the earth is a ball, out of the Dark Ages came another doctrine, which is convincing everybody that God punished his innocent son, pretended it was you, pretended it was everybody in humanity. That is not the truth. That is the equivalent of the ball earth doctrine. Just like you have evolution in science, you have the penal substitute doctrine, which was made up by the same satanic bastards put in the Christian religion. Just as you have flat earthers on YouTube, the principal legal standard for the first genuine doctrinal reformation of the church is the truth of the Christian doctrines. And this is where they fail. You'll find that they're very conservative scientists when it comes to flat earth. You'll find that they're very conservative when it comes to human law and various things like that. But when you delve into their Christian doctrines, you'll see that they are the equivalent of ball earthers. And this is what they don't tie all together, which is the standard to prove all things. There is a standard to prove all things. Not just prove all things. There is a method of proving what the true Christian doctrines are, and we have done it in the principal legal standard.